Eldarien and Rorlane navigate through the streets of Ristfand, leading their horses by the bridle, until they come to the courtyard in which the temple of Niraniel rises before them. They tie the horses to a post and ascend the steps to the large wooden doors, in which are carved ornate designs and runes, the temple being one of the last remaining places in which the old runes and the ancient language are still recalled. Eldarien runs his fingers along the runes and reads them aloud.
Oe niranye ainanu illoenelas, inclesa celianin tua einenenaboas. It translates as Niraniel, goddess of light and love, bend to your children when they cry,
he says, and then sees a small handbell suspended to the right of the doorway. He pulls it, and the sound rings out clearly in the air. The two men wait a minute or two, and then the door swings open, revealing the clean-shaven face of a young cleric. He wears the flowing blue robe of a sage and scholar, and bows to them when he sees them.
Welcome to the Temple of Niraniel, travelers. Or at least I assume that you are travelers by the look of you.
We are,
replies Eldarien.
We come from the north with important news.
How then may I be of assistance?
The cleric asks.
Could we perhaps speak with the master of your order?
The Grand Master lives here, though he is very busy. Perhaps a word about what this news might be is in order. Then I shall know whether it is worthy of his time.
I assure you it is,
says Eldarien.
It concerns the safety of the inhabitants of Ristfand and imperial plans concerning the progress of the war.
The expression on the man's face betrays concern and confusion, as if he does not know what to make of these words and is searching in his mind for what to do. At last he says,
This way, then. I shall show you to his Radra.
The Grand Master, much older than the man who answered the door, also wearing a robe of blue, but with white hair and a beard that make him look both ancient and wise, rises to greet them as they enter his chamber. The man who had first answered the door silently departs with a bow.
My name is Ierendal,
the Grand Master says kindly, shaking the hand first of Eldarien and then of Rorlane, who introduce themselves in turn. Then he gestures to chairs in front of his desk.
Please have a seat.
After he is seated opposite them, he continues,
You are very welcome here. How may I be at your service?
We come bearing a message of gravity for the people of this city.
Eldarien begins.
We bring news concerning what we have unintentionally witnessed, you could say intercepted, concerning the Empire's plans to attack the city.
Sirian's face becomes serious, and his grey-blue eyes reveal an ocean of depth, compassion, and concern. He leans forward in his chair and says,
Please tell me all that you can.
And Sir Eldarien does. He recounts the events that unfolded in the barrow of Serra Galaptes, and then continues with their journey south and the warnings they issued on their way to Ristfand. Sirian remains silent throughout and does not even voice a single question until Eldarien has said all that he finds important to say. Sirian opens his mouth to reply, but at that moment there is a knock at the door.
I think I know who that might be,
he says softly, and then in a loud voice,
Please come in.
The door creaks open, and they all turn as a young woman with long auburn brown hair, clothed in poor tan cloth and dark leather, steps into the room. She sees the guests and bows her head, saying softly,
Forgive me. I did not know that you were speaking with someone.
No, come in, Elmarie,
Sirian says.
I wish for you to be present for this conversation, if that is acceptable to my guests.
Why would it not be?
Says Eldarien.
If you trust her to be admitted to our councils, then so do we.
I most certainly do.
Seeing that there are only 3 chairs in the room, Eldarien rises to his feet and gestures for Elmarie to be seated.
Oh no, I couldn't,
she says, raising her hands in protest.
It is you who should receive our hospitality now, and not we yours.
Please, I insist,
says Eldarien.
Very well.
Elmarie sits in the chair, and Eldarien stands beside her, with one hand on the back of Rawlane's chair and another on hers. But to her surprise, rather than feeling threatened to have this man standing over her, she feels comforted.
These men bring us news of the Empire's plan to retaliate.
Cirion says, looking at Elmarié.
They speak of a military force that is being gathered and shall march upon the city. We know not the time of their arrival, but they heard the agreement itself being made, and I have no reason to doubt these men and the word they bring.
But you also have very little reason to trust us.
Rawlane says,
And so for that trust we must thank you.
I have seen many things in my lifetime,
Cirion replies.
and it is obvious that you speak only the truth.
He sighs deeply and adds,
And this truth concerns me, for you speak not only of an army of men, but of fell creatures of the earth, or rather of the abyss, who intend to join with the forces of men to bring destruction upon their enemy.
It is difficult to believe ourselves.
says Rawlane.
But we witnessed such creatures with our own eyes and saw the pact being made between a leader of men and a leader of beasts.
Then we must act according to this knowledge and prepare as best we can for such a terror.
Cirion concludes,
We came to speak to you rather than any other,
says Eldarien,
because I thought members of the temple more sure of trust than leaders of the government. I hoped that you would be able to tell us whom we may trust with this message and whom we may not.
It was a wise decision on your part,
Cirion answers.
for trust is hard given to the leaders of Ristfand in these days. I myself do not know whether the hearers is trustworthy or not. However, he ordered the quelling of the rebellion in the ghetto, and this seems to indicate that he is willing to harm his own people in defense of the ideals and supremacy of the Empire.
To whom then should we address ourselves?
Asks Eldarien.
We need force of arms to fight, but we cannot simply speak to the officers of the Empire and ask them to aid us in a fight against their own men. Perhaps there is no choice but to speak to whatever leaders of the rebellion still remain.
You sound hesitant to do such a thing.
Elmarié observes, and then quickly adds,
Forgive me for speaking out of turn.
No, Elmarié.
Cirion responds before the others can answer.
You are admitted into our council, so please speak freely.
And then to the two men he adds,
Though she is young, she is more deserving of my trust than all others.
So Eldarien addresses Elmarié directly and answers her question. As he does so, he sees a glimmer deep in her eyes which kindles something in his own, almost like a recognition of a long-lost friend or a promise fulfilled at last.
I am loath to join with the rebels simply because I fear their cause is not entirely just. I wish to defend the people of Telmerion, and at whatever cost, but I do not intend to stand for a particular political goal or a concept of Telmerion, either of my own making or of another's.
Elmarié nods silently, as if this answer more than satisfies her.
You speak with wisdom.
Cirion says,
Those who fight for the rebellion are brave and strong, but they are also rash and at times short-sighted. However, I know not what other avenues we have available to us. Either the government of Ristfand shall agree to stand with us against the imperial attack, or they shall stand against us. But the rebels, even in their diminished state after the battle, shall surely stand and fight, and we must be willing to stand at their side, even if only for a time.
But is there any hope of success?
Rawlane asks.
If the rebellion has already been crushed by the imperial forces within the city, what hope do we have to stand against an ever-large force seeking to invade from without? Indeed, if both of these are true, we would be facing an enemy both within the city and outside of it, and simultaneously. It is not possible.
No, it is not.
Cirion agrees.
But sometimes impossible things, since they are the only course of action, are necessary. And then one realizes that they are in fact possible after all.
I hope you are right.
Says Eldarien.
But what would you have us do?
You both speak already as if you are willing to stand strong and to take up arms to fight. Is this correct?
Cirion asks.
I do not know if there is another way,
Eldarien says,
but I will fight only in defense of the people, no more.
But you need a commander, and also an army, or at least a fighting force, a militia, whom you may join. You cannot very well create one yourself, nor lead it to victory.
Cirion says.
Our part was simply to deliver the message.
Rorlain says,
We can do no more than that, besides remaining and lending our meagre strength to whatever resistance the inhabitants of the city can mount.
I am afraid that is very little.
says Elmarier.
The city is suffering, and her people are weak. To all appearances, the rebellion has been crushed, and nothing remains but broken hearts and bodies trying to mend.
As I said before, I believe there is more than meets the eye.
Says Cirion.
The rebel movement remained concealed for many years before bursting into the open in bloodshed. I believe that it still slumbers under the surface. We need only get in touch with it and find a way to relay your message.
I may know of someone who can help.
Elmarier offers.
She is the wife of a man who was once the counselor to the Heras, but who left this position and fought on the side of the rebellion in the uprising.
He would indeed be a good person to speak to,
says Eldarien.
both for the mind of the hearers as well as that of the rebellion.
Unfortunately, he was killed during the conflict,
Replies Elmarier, softly lowering her eyes.
and her 2 children died shortly thereafter during their imprisonment for the crimes of their father.
I am sorry to hear that.
Eldarien says.
Yes, it is a situation of deepest sadness.
Elmarier says.
But she still lives and is recuperating in the hospital in the ghetto. Perhaps I could bring you to speak with her, and she could aid you in some way.
She may indeed.
Rorlain answers.
But is she well enough for such a conversation?
I believe that she is.
Then that settles things for our next step.
Cirion says.
Let us hope that it provides us more steps following. But before anything, I suppose that both of you want to know more about what has happened in the city.
Indeed, we do,
says Eldarien.
Then I shall tell you what I know.
Cirion then relates to the 2 men what he has already explained to Elmarier concerning the intent and accomplishment of the rebel forces and the current state of the city, particularly those in the ghetto. When he has concluded, Eldarien responds,
It indeed seems that visiting the ghetto is the best and most prudent course of action, but my heart grieves that we find no trustworthy avenue by which to address our concerns to the leaders of the city, into whose hands the well-being of their subject is entrusted.
I agree,
Cirion says.
but you may find precisely that also in the ghetto. I expect that many leaders of the city are favorable to the rebellion, even if secretly.
In the meantime, the citizens should be warned and given opportunity to make provision for themselves, even to flee to the east if they desire.
Rorlain adds,
That is true,
says Cirion.
but it also needs to be done without causing panic. I think that it would be good to give you both a couple days to make contact with a leader of the people before following this latter suggestion, for if possible, the leadership should be told before the citizenry. I leave the former in your hands, but as for the latter, you can trust it to myself and the members of the temple. We shall warn our people at the appropriate time and also aid them as much as we are able.
Thank you for your cooperation and your aid, Cirion.
Eldarien says,
And yours as well, Elmarier.
We face a threat that far surpasses our native ability to counteract.
Cirion says.
We will do all that we can, but even then we must turn to prayer before all else. For there lies hope beyond hope and strength beyond strength.
Yes, in that you speak the truth.
Eldarien says softly, running his hands through his hair thoughtfully. Elmarier looks up at him and sees that the expression on his face betrays great pain, a pain perhaps deeper than any she has ever witnessed. And from beholding his face and the depth glistening in his eyes like a mystery hidden at the bottom of an immeasurable pool of water, she feels also his heart. Immediately she knows, in a deep certainty far beyond words, that Eldarien too is a pain-bearer, that he carries the hearts of others, the burdens of others, just as she does. Overwhelmed as she is by this awareness, she is startled when the dialogue continues, and she has to force herself from her own thoughts back to the flow of the conversation.
These creatures that we witnessed,
Eldarien says to Cirion,
do you know what manner of beings they are?
I have studied much concerning such things since the rumours first reached Ristfand,
replies Cirion.
but I have been unable to confirm the truth of my studies until you came, bringing your account as first-hand witnesses. Now I know that what I had judged to be the case is indeed true, that is, to the limits of my current knowledge. I still do not know everything, and mysteries remain which beg for an answer.
Whatever you can tell us may prove to be of great importance,
says Eldarien.
To know the manner of beasts that we fight may help us to discover a way to defeat them.
Are they not slain by ordinary means?
Cirion asks.
No, they are, but
I understand. You know not how many there are, nor how they are brought into being. We could find ourselves fighting an immense and innumerable force that would be the downfall of our people. I think this is what we all fear, but this is a fear to which we are afraid to give voice.
indeed,
says Eldarien.
but if there is a way to prevent them, even to cut off their very origin or their life at the source,
They do not even have life.
Cirion says,
Not in the true sense of the word. It seems that my knowledge concerning these beasts will indeed help answer some questions within your hearts. You know what they are, more than most, since you have seen them with your own eyes and witnessed their terror and their power. But the lore of the past can shed light that experience alone does not give.
please, we are listening.
Eldarien says, Elmarie, who has heard of these creatures, nonetheless feels far out of her depth and tries to cling to the thread of the conversation, having missed the earlier account that Eldarien gave of their path unto this place.
The Druidach, as we call them,
Cirion begins.
are not men, nor have they ever been. They are not the dead who have been brought back to life. That much you both sensed. But what then are they? They take the form of men, but are not men. They take the form of the living, but they do not live. How is this possible? It is because they are unearthly, wicked creatures born of a dark, forbidden art. Their making is of a power much greater than our own, an ancient evil that lurks in the shadows, ever trying to seduce human hearts who were made of pure light and for pure light, with the allure of darkness.
So these are creatures of darkness, born of darkness?
Asks Eldarien.
Yes, though under all that darkness is to be found a forgery of light. For light alone is life, and these things live indeed, though in twisted manner. Dark itself cannot create, it can only destroy. But if there is any guise of creativity, of making, imputed to the forces of darkness, that is due not to their ability to create or give life, but to their theft of goodness. Whatever made these creatures stole the concept of man, what little hollow part of it that it could possess, and fashioned it into what we now call Druidach.
But why would it do this?
Rolain interjects.
For pride and glory, I suppose,
Cirion says.
but also for war, for the destruction of the light and the reign of darkness.
A terrifying thought.
Rolain sighs.
Indeed, but there are more forces in this world than those of darkness alone. Many powers are invisible to our eyes, and in their hands, even more than in our own, is the destiny of the world. We speak of the gods, and rightly so, but in the ancient days they were called Anion, the radiant ones. A great deal has been forgotten over the ages, to the grief of many. But to learn again what has been forgotten may reveal to us a path that has been, until now, hidden from our eyes.
How would we do that if it has been forgotten?
Rolain asks.
That is a difficult question to answer.
Syrian replies.
Or rather, it is simple, to find those who have not forgotten. The difficulty lies in finding them, if exist they do.
He rises from his chair and turns to look out the window, crossing his hands behind his back. The others watch him silently for a long moment.
But there are enough things to occupy us at present.
He continues at last.
I will reflect deeply on this and speak with you about anything that I learn or that is made known to my heart. For now, however, let us walk in the way that is clear to us, and do all in our power to protect the people of Ristfand.
With these words their councils conclude, and Eldarien and Rorlain take their leave. But just as Eldarien is stepping through the threshold of the door, Rorlain having already gone ahead of him, Syrian calls to him. He turns back and sees the old man looking kindly at him.
Yes?
He asks.
I have seen you before, Eldarien.
Syrian says.
You came to the temple in the past, did you not?
Many years ago I did.
He answers.
Much has changed since then.
Worry not.
Syrian assures him.
I know what you were then, and I see clearly what you are now. Indeed, I see that the man who prayed in our temple then, the signs of imperial office marking him out clearly, is the same man who stands before me now, bearing the signs of a man of honor and integrity that shine even more clearly than did the insignias of office that he once bore.
Eldarien nods silently to this and opens his mouth to speak but finds no words. Instead, he shares a final silent glance with Syrian and then with Elmarie, who stands at his side. The eyes of both seem to pierce under the veil of his pain and to touch something deep within his heart. And by this gaze, a gaze of love and tenderness, his heart is eased, and the spark that he carries within him is kindled to burn still more strongly and transparently. The next day, Elmarie leads Rorlain and Eldarien into the ghetto and to the hospital. Tiliana is seated with her back against the wall and an old blanket draped over her knees, and she looks up as they enter.
Good morning, Tiliana.
Elmarie says, crouching next to her and wrapping her in her arms. Tiliana returns the embrace and then directs her gaze to the two strangers. She asks,
Who are these men?
They are travelers from the north.
Elmarie replies,
And they have come to help the people of Ristfand.
Good morning, my lady.
Eldarien says with a gentle bow,
My name is Eldarien Ilomiel.
And I am Rorlain Farael, his friend and companion.
Tiliana smiles softly, embarrassed at the courtesy of the two men, a courtesy which she knows, without the need for speech, springs from their reverence for her in her suffering more than from any status that she may have or claim.
It is good to meet both of you.
She replies,
My name is Tiliana Valesa. I apologize that I cannot rise to greet you. I am still recovering from some weeks of illness.
There is no need for apology,
says Eldarien, and he and Rorlain sit on the floor facing her.
How are you feeling today?
Elmarie asks.
Better still.
Tiliana answers.
It seems that you will have me in this life longer yet. I looked right in the face of death, and yet you...
Here she momentarily squeezes Elmarie's hand.
Pulled me through.
That is good to hear.
Says Elmarie.
If you are open to it, Eldarien and Rorlain wish to speak with you in the hopes of preventing more suffering and loss of life.
I would be happy to help in whatever way I may. I just wish you were able to speak to Alsenor, my husband, instead. He would know much more than I.
We understand and have been told of the painful losses that you suffered. You have our deepest sympathies,
says Eldarien, and he allows these words to echo in silence for a moment before continuing.
Elmarie speaks the truth. We wish to help prevent more suffering from afflicting our people in the conflict that descends upon us like a curtain of darkness.
In what way can I help you?
Tiliana asks.
We were told that your husband was once the counselor to the Heras. Is that correct?
Yes.
How many years ago did he depart from that position?
5. It was shortly after our first child was born.
Seeing the pain in her eyes as she speaks, Eldarien reaches out and takes Tiliana's hand in his own.
I am sorry that we must revisit these painful memories so soon.
No,
She says, holding back tears.
there are good memories too, and I want to cling to them, even if they are now touched with sorrow.
Thank you for allowing us then to join you in these memories, both the joyful and the sorrowful,
Says Eldarien, giving her hand a final tender squeeze and then laying it back upon the blanket. She nods silently to him, and then he continues.
Did he ever speak with you about what he experienced in the position of counselor and what led him to retire?
He did.
Tiliana answers.
He experienced hypocrisy and lies. He also knew injustice. That is why when he left, he did not just retire from his position, but sought a way to fight back, to resist, and joined with the rebel movements present in Ristfand.
We will speak of that soon.
Eldarien says.
But first I want to ask about those things you mentioned, hypocrisy, lies and injustice. Did he give you details about what he encountered?
The man himself?
Tiliana replies.
The man himself was what he witnessed. Heras Glendus Medora is a dishonourable person, though I suspect he is not unlike the other Jarls, at least some of them. However, what I am about to tell you will likely surprise you. I said that my husband left the counselorship and joined the rebellion, but in fact, Glendus has cooperated with the rebellion in secret for years.
He has cooperated with the rebellion?
Rolain asks in surprise.
But did he not command the quelling of the uprising here in Ristfand?
He did.
Tiliana answers.
And now you see an example of what I meant when I referred to hypocrisy and injustice. He has crushed the first stirrings of open rebellion in the city to give a clear message to all. I am sided with the Empire and will tolerate no resistance. My allegiance lies with the Imperial Councillor, and, through him, with the legate in Brugg Hill, and, in fact, with the Emperor himself. That is what he intends to say, and what he wishes people to believe, but he seeks instead only to put the Imperials off guard, so that, when the second wave of rebellion comes, much stronger than the first, it will have a greater chance of success.
Do you think that he will reveal himself openly at that time?
Rolain asks.
I do not know. He may aim to play behind the scenes until the very end.
He acts with great political tact.
Eldarien says.
That, I imagine, is how he justifies it to himself. But he has had his own civilians, indeed the members of his own rebellion, slaughtered in order to keep up a facade. I assume that this is not the first time something like this has happened.
Not at all.
Tiliana says.
My husband had witnessed enough to know the Heras intent, and felt that his position as counsellor was nothing but a facade as well. It gave people the impression that Glendus listened to the people. After all, Alsenor was meant to be their representative, but he listened only to himself. He played friend to the Imperial Councillor and made whatever compromises seemed to fit in with his plans, and my husband was there only to keep up the perfect picture.
What picture was that exactly?
Asks Rolain.
The picture of a Heras who is a consummate blend of Empire and Telmerion, who brings both to peaceful coexistence within his own rule.
That is what the Empire has wished to accomplish, or rather what we have been led to believe,
Says Eldarien.
and to the surprise of many, it seems to have been more or less accomplished the last 200 years.
To the loss of many things that should never have been taken from us.
Tiliana adds.
The Telmerion of the past is now lost to us, and if things continue, I fear that even the Telmerion of the present and future will be lost as well.
We are going to do all in our power to prevent that,
Rolain assures her.
just as your husband did.
I am grieved at the actions of the Heras,
Eldarien says.
and at his duplicity. Nonetheless, it is hopeful news to us that he intends to support the rebellion against the Empire. How far he shall follow through with this, of course, we do not know, But now we know with whom to speak regarding the protection of the city from attack.
From attack, you say?
Tiliana asks.
Yes, regretfully we are here now to bring warning to the people that Imperial troops intend to march upon the city.
Eldarien explains.
And what then?
Then we all stand and fight,
Concludes Rolain.
though in your condition,
He adds delicately,
it might be wise to flee to the east. I wish for no further harm to come to you.
Thank you for your concern, but I shall not flee. My health is returning rapidly, and even if I cannot fight with the sword, I will care for those who do so in whatever way I can, and will tend to the wounded as I have been so lovingly attended.
Thank you, Tiliana,
Elmarie says.
for everything.
I could not in good conscience do anything else.
She replies.
But is there anything else that you need?
Eldarien runs his hand over his beard as he thinks for a moment, and then says,
We will need to speak with the hearers and warn him of the coming attack. But if he is living, as you say, a life of hypocrisy, doing so may bring about bad fruits as well as good ones.
What do you think could happen?
asks Elmarie.
I am not sure. It is difficult to judge the mind of a man I have never met. I see not how he could deny such a threat to the very well-being and existence of his city. He may rather be forced to reveal his true intentions and take up arms with the rebellion on behalf of the very people of Ristfand. But that would be the best scenario.
He may also betray his people and side with the Empire if he has something to gain.
Rolain adds.
That is true.
Agrees Eldarien.
Although I suspect he will seek to walk a line somewhere between the two extremes. If I understand anything about hypocrisy, that is its way, to give the appearance of unconditional goodness while underneath lies duplicity.
May it be that he publicly supports the Empire while secretly relaying the word to the forces of the rebellion?
Asks Elmarie.
Would such a course be feasible?
I suppose it is,
Tiliana says.
though that would leave the ordinary citizen in the dark.
It seems clear that either way, good or ill, he is going to bring word to the members of the rebellion.
Eldarien says.
And that is why we must speak with him, whatever else may come of it.
And what about the rest of Ristfand?
Elmarie asks.
As Syrian said,
Rolain answers.
the members of the temple can help spread the word.
However, we also suspect that more people armed for battle will be coming to Ristfand from the settlements to the north, hoping to aid in the defense of the city.
Says Eldarien.
We asked for aid on our journey here, but to come to the aid of a city on the brink of invasion that is not even aware of the threat of attack, that would be deeply disconcerting for those brave souls.
It seems that these questions will remain unanswered until we speak with the hearers.
Rolain says.
I really don't see what good continuing to deliberate about his possible responses shall bring.
Then let us go immediately to speak with him.
Eldarien says, turning to Rolain.
We will bring word to you immediately,
He continues, looking at Elmarie.
so that you may know his mind and may act accordingly.
What a grievous ill,
Tiliana says, by way of conclusion.
when the citizens have little hope of protection by their lawful leader, but instead must fear him.